Hello, everybody. This is the OLM Issue Triage meeting, and it is August 4th, 2022. We're going to be looking at some of the available RUCPAC issues. And we'll start with this one that was open 22 hours ago. So asks us to refactor the new default unpacker due to growing parameter list. This seems like a great first issue. Let's see who created this. This was created as a part of.
I think Tim made this from a to-do comment.
I added this to do in the PR that merged yesterday.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm not totally convinced this is a good first issue, mainly because like all of these are required fields to be able to set up like a valid working unpacker.
Mhm.
So I think it'll take a little bit of thought and design in terms of figuring out how do we do something other than just passing each individual one while also making it obvious that they're all required. It might just be a struct that we pass that has options that we have to do struct validation to make sure we don't have a default value or something. But to me, at least, it wasn't immediately obvious how to fix this. Otherwise, I probably just would have.
Yeah. If everything is required, it seems like, we might want to make I don't have a default unpacker package, right? And then make a new default unpacker options function that like would take these and then follow up with like, options for actual configuration. So that the function call doesn't just grow continuously, using that nice options pattern. But until we have something that is optional, I don't know that I would recommend.
Yeah, essentially the problem is that like as we add a new source type, so like we started out with just image and we only needed like the unpack image. And then we added a what was the next one? A get type. It's like, okay, well now we need root CAs so that we can validate something, right? And then it's like, oh, and then we added a upload type. So now we need to add the base upload manager URL. So it's like every time we add a new source, we have some new required fields. So it's like almost guaranteed that anything new that gets added is probably going to be required. So that's the struggle.
But could it be like, what we see here? We have this new unpacker. Could we make like a default unpacker options, and that's like sent in, and that has all the the only way to build that options structure is to go through the new unpacker options method, which would have its required fields, but then this function, like I don't know if this is the function call we want it to be, but if what you're saying is that it's based on, sorry,
I guess I would say like, so it sounds like what you're suggesting is just kind of moving the goalpost a little bit such that like a new default unpacker options function is going to have to basically take this same set of parameters and it's going to end up with the same sorts of problems. So in my mind, like I would probably just say like, let's put this on important. Maybe it's important soon. I don't know if it's important that soon, but I don't think it's a good first issue. And then we could, I think we could move on.
Yeah, I just want to get to the crux of it. So do we have any other forms of unpackers right now?
There's going to be another new one added. Aki's got a PR that's going to add an HTTP source, which okay. I don't know whether it needs to add any new parameters or not.
Yeah, it seems like to me this to do is like slightly in the wrong place, where if we have those different types of options for unpackers, we'd want to make sure that function doesn't grow continuously. I don't have a problem with function calls with a lot of required fields if they are all required.
Yeah, really, this is like the whole point of this function is just because we have multiple provisioners that all want to use the same underlying behavior for how to unpack the various sources. And so
I
like,
see.
as we add a new source, we want all of the provisioners, we kind of want to break all of the provisioners so that they can just update their invocation of this function and like automatically get access to that new source.
I see.
And these are like, this is invoked from main.go
Right.
direct. So, and most of these things are passed in like almost as flags to main.go. So I don't, yeah. Like I said, it wasn't immediately obvious how to improve this.
Okay, so I think that is a key piece of information that this was missing. And I might just want to add that new unpackers are going to be built. Well, new unpackers may rely on this function, and having this many required fields introduces a requirement on all of those unpackers to provide all of these fields, right? That's what complicates this, right? Or introduces the need to fix this.
Tim, I don't disagree with your comment about just the number of parameters. We're just debating what change would we make that would solve the parameter problem while also accounting for the fact that it's likely that there will be more required parameters in the future.
Yeah.
Is it, I mean, maybe I'm not understanding quite enough, but I mean, it sounds like we just use a struct here and the problem goes away. Unless there's some foundational philosophical problem that we're having with unpackers. If it's
I think
just
that-
the number of parameters that are going to scale over time, I don't think it's a huge deal to just use a struct config here.
I think the problem with struct is that it turns this from a compile time required problem to a runtime required problem. And so like maybe there's trade-offs and we're okay with the runtime, but effectively like each of those parameters is required. And so if you turn it into a struct, then it's possible to pass a struct with default values for some of the fields, which may not be valid. And then you have to return an error and say like, sorry, but like at runtime, I can't do the thing that you're asking me to do. And then that's bad because then it's easy to make a change to the struct and miss a spot in one of the provisioners that we have. And then you don't really realize it unless you have an EDE test or something that tries to run all the code and hopefully then error on you rather than do the thing you expect. So it's kind of harder to catch, right? Like if we just have parameters here and you add a new one, then the thing will fail to compile. But with a struct, it'll compile and then you'll get an error later.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how long we've spent on this, but not sure if it's worth investing more into this issue outside of probably updating the labels I put yesterday.
No, totally. I just wanted to make sure that, we hit this issue. It looked very clear that this was a great first issue, but then when we dug into it, there was obviously more design decisions around this. So I just wanted to capture what the design decisions that needed, like what the problems with the function is today and why we can't just create a quick one-off solution. And then I want to update the labels.
Sounds good.
Okay, so basically I just capture that. It isn't immediately clear what the solution is. You need these parameters for the default unpacker. The number of required parameters will probably grow and other unpackers will be built on top of this unpacker. Moving these parameters to an option pattern will force us to evaluate the validity of the structure at runtime, creating additional work in error handling. I can't propose a solution right now, but we're going to remove the label. That's good. Boom. So I'm just going to get rid of this issue or this good first issue. Now, do we still want to mark this as priority important soon? Seems like a priority, but whatever. Do we want to assign someone to think about this? It is in the 9.0 or 0.9.0 milestone. Or will this be assigned later, Tim?
Just move it to backlog, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. Let's look at the next issue. Should be able to generate cert without getting access to CA. Oh, this is that bit where cert, Joe, you had brought this up in a separate meeting where cert manager isn't able to write just a portion of the.
Yeah.
But we
So
can't like
yeah, as far as I can tell, whenever you ask for a cert, even if it's a CA cert, cert manager says, okay, here's your cert and your key. So if you ever want to share trust, if you ever want to share that CA cert with any clients, you're giving them access to a secret that has the CA's key as well, which is not good because then someone else can go and write, basically mint their own certs from your CA and then have your other clients trust other people's servers. So like the immediate thing is like, okay, well, just don't give our back to anybody that you don't trust, right? Because then they won't be able to read the secret, they won't be able to use the cert. And if they want to connect to RUCPack services, then they'll just have to disable trust of the server validation or whatever. But I think to fix this, what we probably need to do is do something that effectively just exports or injects just the cert pieces of the CAs that we care about into a config map. And then components like provisioners that need to talk to each other or RUCPack CTL that needs to talk to the RUCPack services can look at that config map rather than looking at the secret, which also contains the key.
Quick question. When you say clients, who are, sorry, client, so we sign all our certs for RUCPack services, and then the clients of these read, that's CA to verify the connections. Who are clients in this case?
So there's two groups of clients that matter in this case. One is provisioners that are talking to each other to ask each other for their unpacked bundles. If there's like so if the bundle deployment provisioner and the bundle provisioner are different, then the bundle deployment provisioner has to go and ask the bundle provisioner's web server for its unpacked bundle. So that's a thing that happens when when we use the registry bundle provisioner and we convert the registry bundle to a plain bundle, and then the plain bundle deployment provisioner has to ask the registry provisioner via the content URL, like, hey, can I have that bundle content? And it does that over HTTPS connection. And that's protected by QBarback proxy. And ideally we do server validation. And to do the server validation, then the client needs that CA. So that's one case. The other case is RUCPack CTL run. And I don't know if any other of the RUCPack CTL commands do it, but RUCPack CTL run uploads a bundle to a web server that we're running in RUCPack And same thing. So it needs to validate the upload manager server cert. So it needs the CA to do that.
Got it. Yeah, I was just thinking it might make sense instead of a CA to throw this in behind the RBAC proxy or a RBAC proxy, but I think a CA, or sorry, a config map makes more sense. It makes more sense to mount that data to a config map because it'll be easier for most controllers to consume. And you're currently talking, you're investigating if cert manager is going to have some support for this, and alternatively, we're going to just copy it to a config map. So once we land on that, we're going to know how we want to move forward, right?
Yeah, and it looks like cert manager is not going to do anything fast enough for us to be able to really use it. There is a project called Cert Manager Trust that basically does this, except it expects that you've got a single namespace in your entire cluster where you have sensitive stuff. And then the trust controller lets you say, grab the thing from the sensitive namespace and copy pieces of it out into all these other namespaces. So that doesn't really help us because, like, yeah, we could say that the RuckPack system namespace is the quote unquote trusted namespace, but someone else is going to want to install RuckPack in a cluster where there's a different namespace that's the trusted one, so then we couldn't use it. So I don't think that's really a solution for us. So in my mind, I think the solution is like, well, we probably need to write a controller that just looks for a particular secret and copies a key out of it into a config map. And the suggestion from David Eads was do it such that it's based on like an annotation in a config map. So like the same sort of injection thing that Cert Manager does for webhook configurations and CRDs, like do the same sort of thing there. So like an annotation in a config map that says, please inject this CA's key here, please. And then we'd have a controller that would do that. So the downside obviously is that like that's a whole other controller and it's more complexity for us to manage. But if anyone else has any simpler solutions, then obviously all ears, but I couldn't think of any.
Yeah, well, it obviously has to be on cluster. So it just needs to be on cluster. Is there a plan to host this outside of the RuckPack repository, or is it going to be part of the RuckPack? It seems very tightly coupled to RuckPack, but I assume that copying and pasting subparts of secrets or certificates could be useful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that the reason that the Cert Manager Trust component only sources from a single namespace is because there's some security implications of having a more generic solution. So if we were going to do something like that, it would either be that, in which case it wouldn't help us, or it would be something that was probably insecure.
Yep.
So in my mind, I would probably say we should just have a controller in RuckPack's core controllers that do just the thing that RuckPack needs. But I don't know. Part of the thought process for this.
No, I think you're right. And if we're saying that it's only going to work on this very specific annotation, it's always possible to move this out as a separate component if you really need to. I think for the purposes of getting this out and running in a kind of scoped down manner, that throwing it in this controller is a valid approach. Given that we have this additional information, can we mark this as a good first issue? It doesn't seem like it's a huge ask to introduce a new controller that will do this.
It's not huge. It's also not tiny. It's kind of in between.
Is it huge? Or sorry, what makes it medium? Because what I'm envisioning is use QBuilder to spin up another controller. It's a little obscure to me what that controller looks like in the sense it's not for a CRD type, right? And then it looks for a config map with a specific annotation, and if found, it copies it to some location. What additional work do you? What do
I
you?
mean, a lot was just kind of plumbing. Like, for example, there's not an obvious binary right now that would run it. So like the way that we've been doing things, and this is another thing that I've been kind of thinking about, but essentially what we'd probably do in the current state of the repo is just add another binary that does just this, which like requires a whole bunch of changes to make sure it gets integrated in the right places and runs and has manifests and all sorts of stuff. If we separately say that like, oh, well, we want to consolidate all of our core stuff into a single binary, then what you're describing, Alex, becomes a lot more like what would happen. But we're just not there yet. So that's why it's not quite so straightforward like right now today.
Got it. I think once we settle on those issues, it may be a good first issue, but for now, we'll just add this comment directing people that this will probably be taken up. And we'll make sure, is this something we still want in 9.0.9.0, or is that a backlog item?
I think we should do this as soon as possible because it's a potential security issue.
Yeah, 9.0 it is. Cool. Next one. Provisioner visibility API. Yeah, this makes sense. You know, if you're going to make a rec pack config, it may make sense to put that if we create a rec pack config controller, it may make sense to make it so that that public CA is propagated to the config map as a part of that controller. Let's see the rest of these comments.
I think my 2 cents on this is that I think, and you guys can tell me if you disagree, but I think we've all kind of concluded that eventually there's going to be a need for a provisioner class API. And the provisioner class API is basically the thing that says, if you see a bundle or bundle deployment with this provisioner class name, then make sure that this named controller that's in the provisioner class is the thing that reconciles it. So it's effectively a layer of indirection that we don't have right now. And the benefit is that you can have more than just a single string that describes what you want your provisioner to do. So a provisioner class could have some configuration that lets you configure how the provisioner works for that particular unpack or bundle deployment.
Yeah, No, I agree with that. I don't think we have anything that we need to do now, and it's in the backlog, and this is definitely not a good first issue, so I think we're okay. Continuing to iterate over this, until it's assigned.
Yeah, Tim, do you see any urgency on this one?
Probably not. I think I'm more interested in like the higher level components, Deppy, but at least internally, we probably don't have any runway for that component for at least a month, right? So I don't see any urgency here. Seems like a nice quality of life thing. I wouldn't expect this to hit anytime soon.
Yeah, plus I really want to make sure that we get Rec Pack in a state that people can use it and buy into it before we start expanding the number of provisioners and everything that we support. I think nailing that release is going to be more important than making it completely configurable.
I'd also probably add that I don't think the provisioner class is something we need to put a ton of priority on either. Just maybe as we expand the scope of provisioners, maybe there's like custom logic that needs to happen, but I don't see a huge urgency behind that API introduction either.
The only thing I would say there is that we might want to consider making a format like pattern validation for the provisioner class name fields in the bundle and bundle deployment, so that in the future we could make a provisioner class API where the provisioner class names have to adhere to metadata.name, values. So like we could do that right now. We would, the names that we're currently using are not valid because they have a slash in them, but we could change that such that they become valid. And then in the future, if we want to add provisioner classes, we would just name those provisioner classes with the names that we're already using, and that would be a transparent change.
Yeah, I think when we release these APIs, everything needs to be tightly scoped. It's much easier to expand the scope of an API than restrict it later on. So big +1 there. But I don't think that doesn't need to be tracked as this ticket. Like I think that should be.
That should be a different one. I'll make that one in the background.
Yeah, maybe we create a milestone. Like, Tim, would it be okay to make a milestone 1.0 and just include that one there? Because that's a big thing I really don't want to miss. Like, releasing the API and then having to be backwards compatible is too.
Yeah,
totally
I think we've all seen some pain there. In terms of like how we track it, I don't have a huge preference here. I mean, we're going to be pretty laser focused on these like alpha, beta, etc.
Yep.
Ideas here. I mean, it's going to be a difficult sell trying to lose. So in terms of like how we track this, I don't know if I have a huge preference of 1.x milestone. I mean, certainly Joe with his SDK experience is probably good opinion here too, but as long as we're tracking it, that's cool with me.
Okay.
Yeah, when we did SDK, we did all those sorts of things, and then still, even if we had all those things tracked, we basically had like a 3-month period where like everyone was just scouring anything they could find that was like, are we sure we're okay with this being GA'd? So I think there's plenty of opportunity for us to find those things before we do a GA, even if we don't remember to track every single thing. Now, granted, we should track it if we know about it. That way we don't forget about it later. But yeah, anyway, that's my 2 cents. I think we'll have plenty of opportunity to look for these things later.
And I guess not to continue going down this hole even further, but I think I'm just more interested in tracking historical context over time. So trying to avoid the situation where we're just like opening PRs and have no context. I think I'm more interested in that versus this might be a potential GA requirement. We kind of have this huge bucket at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I could just spin this up really quickly. I do agree. Like, let's track it. And
I will say about the tightly scoped API front, I don't think you're going to hear a ton of disagreements. I did see a couple issues further in the backlog around uh, stuff that we saw. What was it, the package operator? Nico's demo from a couple. Oh geez, it might have been a little longer ago, but that had Onik had created. Some of that stuff, I wonder whether it belongs in the kind of like top level APIs or whether it's provisioner specific. But maybe that's just getting ahead of ourselves, and we'll come to those in some further down. Sorry, Alex, I didn't mean to sidetrack you there.
No problem.
Alex, specifically on that issue you're typing in, I think I would just scope it to the provisioner class names, because then it's like, because that would be probably a good first issue. Like if we just say like, oh, we need to introduce a validation on provisioner class names to match metadata.name, that's like very well scoped, very well defined. Someone can easily go do that.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say that rec pack expects to support multiple provisioners in the future. These provisioners will likely be supported through a CRD, and then which sorry, where are provisioner class names defined in the RecPack API?
In both bundles and bundle deployments.
Update the bundle and bundle. And do you know the field path?
Spec dot provisioner class name for both.
Well, let's see. Include. Metadata dot, what is it, object dot name?
Just metadata.name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Enter that metadata dot name and the dates. And I think we can actually have a client cluster up. I think we can get this really good quick. I can just create a resource that has a bad name. As a user, I would like to so is that sufficient for like just spelling out what the regex needs to be. Pretty sure config maps follow the same restrictions. But then there's like other weird cases where like services, like the name of services can't include periods. So would a service ever be created based off the provisioner class name?
I can't think of reason why it would. I think it's literally just to match up a bundle to another object called provisioner class object.
I'm just gonna add a note there. Not that it's super important. I don't even know if I need to include this, to be honest. You think we should include this or nix it? We'll leave it. If people don't like it, they can remove it.
Say type on the title, by the way, Alex, just before you submit. Provision class.
What's wrong with this?
Probably missing the ER provisioner.
Sorry. Okay. I'll throw this in the backlog so we can properly triage it. Labels we'll add. Good first issue. Should this be priority backlog?
I don't know if we've traditionally used the priority flags or backlog at least. Shoot, I don't even know if that existed. I mean, this is a nice to have. This is a quality of life, right?
I think it's priority.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of
API
like,
review.
unless we're trying to.
I would say
I'm trying to think of,
long-term.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
because I was trying to think like, would we throw this into like a 0.10 milestone and maybe 0.11? It's out there.
Yeah, I mean,
well,
really, it only matters before either A, someone else starts to write a provisioner, or B, we're going to GA it. Like,
yeah.
so not super urgent.
Well, we got it. Cool. Contributor document. Oh yeah, I created this last time. This is in the 9.0 milestone, so I'm beholden to doing this. So this is actually interesting because it kind of ties into some of the ups. For individuals that don't know, there is go to I think it's I think there's some contributor. I'm just going to mention that they're yeah, so we're trying to improve. We're trying to make it very apparent across all projects in the operator framework how one can become a contributor and progress through the different levels of a contributor, i.e. somebody who is new to the project, somebody who's been working on it a little bit and can have LGTM proficiency, and somebody who is a maintainer, blah, blah, blah. The idea being that we want to create a more inclusive project or federation of projects, and but it's not going to be highly prescriptive. There's going to be the opportunity to basically fall back on existing. You can either just like default to like this top level guideline and suggestions, or you can implement your own contributors, onboarding doc basically. But it does need to be defined. That's basically the only requirement. You have to choose model. So I'm just gonna reference that this is kind of relevant to that space. Actually, technically though, you can still reject this. So you should comment on this if you feel strongly that there shouldn't be a good, well-defined contributor onboarding process. So speak now. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Issues. You guys are not doing great because we've actually gone up on the number of issues. That's okay though.
I think most of that is just the fact that we're downstreaming a lot these days.
Yeah. Improve the local source type. Oof. This is a big issue.
I've
We
got
end
a,
up, go for it, Joe.
I was just
What's
gonna say, I've
that?
got a branch that is close to being able to push, so you could probably leave this in 0.9, leave it as 9. I think it looks like it's pretty good. I don't know, Tim, if you have any other thoughts on it.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I was going to ask. Is the exact same thing. Looks good to me. We landed the. Jeez, man, I can't think today. We landed the the upload source type. Sorry, jeez, brain was spinning. Might be worth trying to see what's left in the 0.8 milestone and see if we can cut a release. I think it might be the helper provisioner we threw in there. In my opinion, we just punt that back. We landed enough functionality for this current minor version.
Okay, sorry, I had to add a bunch of. I had forgotten to add the triaged. I thought we were using triaged. I just feel like we probably need some process to exclude tickets in the future. You know, otherwise,
Gotta
we're
have
gonna
a
keep-
mean time to live of 2 weeks, apparently.
Sorry, what was that?
If we just closed everything within 2 weeks of it being open, we don't have to worry about it. Joking.
That's that's a good way to do it. Yeah. I do think so. For the benefit of this issue triage meeting, I think it would be nice if we actually just mark it triage so that we don't have to revisit it once we've kind of gotten it to a point where it's like, okay, somebody can start working on this. And the only way I can think is by labeling like triaged and then
Yeah, we can do that. I would just argue that this repository actually gets triaged out of band from these meetings compared to like the upstream OLM repository.
if people want to
We're usually
triage,
pretty good about that.
yeah, I'm fine with that. But if people want to triage stuff on its own, as long as they're communicating why they're making decisions in the ticket and, you know, encourage people to reopen it if somebody feels differently, then I would say, you know, go and do it. Right? You
And
just
Jordan
need to
makes a good
communicate why.
comment. Oh, my bad, Alex. I was going to say, yeah, I mean, might be worth. I mean, we've just been kind of using these like priority keys and making sure it's like in some sort of backlog or release milestone. But it's probably good here to be standardized. So might be worth discussing this in the working group call or something.
My 2 cents is if it's in a milestone, then it's been backlogged, or I'm sorry, it's been triaged. That seems like the most relevant, because then you're always going to hit the issues that are in the current milestone, because you need to look at them to close the milestone.
Mhm.
I think the exception is if you put stuff in a milestone called backlog, then like that kind of gets to a point where like maybe you never look at it.
Okay, so maybe we should just remove these triage labels for now, and we should create a ask to standardize our use of labels in the upstream repositories. And who knows, maybe there's a document that kind of spells that all out for us, right? And we can pick which ones to choose. Okay. And I think that could be probably, if we look at this contributed document. Oh, I just lost my set. Can somebody speak? I don't know if I can hear anyone.
Can you hear me, Alex?
Perfect, thank you. Okay, all right, so maybe as a part of this ticket, we could just add on. We have this user discussions. Yeah, we can add a ticket. And to your point, it should probably be part of a broader discussion with some of the community, so it's consistent across all of our projects, or at the very least spelled out if they opt out of the the prescribed method. Okay. I think we're at the top of the hour more or less. Are people okay closing out, or is there a specific issue that they want to address? Bueller? Oh,
The answer is trickle down economics, or voodoo economics, excuse me. That's the quote.
okay, well then, on that note, guys, I'm just going to conclude the meeting. I think it's been a pleasure. Thank you
everybody for participating and, helping us, at the very least, identify some that could get closed and some new ones that were needed and improving some existing ones. So this was great. I will see you all next week at the upstream working group meeting, and I encourage you guys, if you have anything you want to talk about, to append that to the agenda now. All right, have a great one. Bye for now.